Amara had always lived a life of quiet routine, one that was predictable yet comfortable. Her mornings were spent in the soft sunlight that spilled through their kitchen window, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as Liam left for work. The house, a cozy home on the edge of a small town, was usually quiet at this hour, except for the occasional hum of passing cars or the distant chatter of neighbors greeting each other. She liked the calm, the steady rhythm of her life, but deep down there was a part of her that longed for something more, something unpredictable. She had married Liam, a kind and dependable man, the kind who made promises and kept them, the kind who never raised his voice or upset the balance of her life. Yet there were days when she caught herself imagining moments outside of her carefully structured world. Fleeting moments of excitement that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush with an emotion she could never quite name. It was on one of these ordinary afternoons that Ethan arrived. He was Liam's friend from college, someone she had known for years but never truly spent time with alone. When he knocked on the door, Amara was surprised. It was usually part of the larger gatherings, the noisy celebrations where everyone laughed and drank and played games. But now he was standing there, Kay casually leaning on the doorframe, looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "Hey, Amara," he said, his voice calm and familiar. But underneath it she sensed a tension, a careful hesitation. He smiled, but it wasn't just a friendly smile. There was something more in his eyes, something that seemed to weigh on him, as if he had been holding back words for a long time. Amara stepped aside to let him in, feeling an odd mixture of curiosity and nervousness. "Hello, Ethan. What brings you here today?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. She told herself it was just a visit, nothing more, but already her mind was buzzing with questions. Why had he come now? And why did it feel as though this visit carried a weight that went beyond small talk? Liam was out running errands, leaving the house empty, quiet, and intimate in a way that made the ordinary feel charged. The sunlight through the windows seemed sharper, the shadows longer, as if the house itself was aware of the moment that was about to unfold. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "Liam asked me to drop by to discuss some plans for the weekend," he said. But Amara noticed the slight tremor in his words, the pause that suggested he had more to say. They moved into the living room, sitting across from each other on the soft couch that Amara had chosen with care, imagining it would make their home warm and inviting. The room felt suddenly smaller, more intimate, as if every piece of furniture, every decoration was leaning in to witness the conversation. Amara could hear the faint tick of the wall clock, each second stretching longer than usual, each moment bringing a strange sense of anticipation that she could neither explain nor ignore. For a while, they spoke about ordinary things: weekend plans, work updates, Liam's latest projects, but there was a tension beneath the words that made Amara acutely aware of Ethan's presence. She noticed the way he leaned slightly forward, as though drawn to her attention, the way his eyes lingered on her face when he spoke, the quiet way he listened that made her feel unexpectedly seen. There was a difference in being alone with him compared to seeing him among a group of friends. Here, there was no noise, no distractions, only the shared space and the quiet electricity that seemed to hang in the air between them as the conversation continued. Amara found herself feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because there was a rare, unexpected warmth in Ethan's words, in his smile, in the way he looked at her, not with judgment or desire, but with a strange kind of admiration. He spoke with a calm confidence that made it easy to listen, to laugh, to feel connected. And yet heavier, because there was an unspoken tension, a subtle weight in his gaze that made her heart race and her thoughts scatter. She realized that this was the first time she had truly been alone with him. Without Liam present, without the chatter of friends or the comfort of routine. It was a quiet, charged moment, and it made her aware of emotions she hadn't explored. Feelings that were new and frightening in their intensity. Then, almost suddenly, the ordinary visit took a different turn. Ethan shifted in his seat, his posture changing in a way that made Amara instinctively lean back, a subtle signal of attention, of curiosity. "Amara," he said, his voice quieter now, more intimate. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't said before." His eyes searched hers, not in a way that demanded an answer, but in a way that invited honesty, a rare vulnerability that made her heart flutter. The house, the afternoon light, the soft hum of distant traffic hall, of it seemed to fade into the background. For the first time in years, Amara felt as though she were standing at the edge of something unexpected. Something that could change the course of an ordinary afternoon. Her breath caught, and she nodded, unsure of what she was agreeing to, unsure of what words would follow. Ethan hesitated, a slight furrow on his brow, and for a moment, there was a silence so thick that Amara could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. The pause wasn't uncomfortable. It was deliberate, as if he were weighing his words, as if the truth he was about to share had been carefully guarded for far too long. She felt a curious mix of fear and anticipation. What could he possibly say that would matter so much? And why now, when Liam was not there? Finally, Ethan leaned slightly forward, and his words came slowly, deliberately, with a sincerity that made Amara's chest tighten. "I've always respected Liam," he said, "and I always will. But I've also admired you. There's something about your kindness, your quiet strength, the way you notice small things about people that I can't forget. I didn't know how to tell you before, and I'm not sure this is the right moment, but I couldn't leave without saying it." Amara's heart raced, a mix of surprise, flattery, and an unfamiliar flutter of emotion. Ouch. She had never imagined hearing such words from Liam's friend. Her life, carefully balanced between love, routine, and comfort, suddenly felt larger, more complicated, more alive. She found herself studying his face, noticing the sincerity in his eyes, the faint tension in his shoulders, the way his hands rested lightly on his knees. There was honesty there, a gentle kind of admiration that didn't threaten her marriage, but still stirred something unexpected within her. Before she could respond, the sound of Liam's car pulling into the driveway shattered the fragile bubble around them. The moment was gone as quickly as it had arrived, leaving Amara feeling both breathless and confused. She excused herself to greet her husband, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't yet process, while Ethan, with a small, almost imperceptible nod, collected his composure. The ordinary afternoon had shifted in ways neither of them could have predicted, even after Liam entered the house. Cheerful and unaware, Amara's thoughts lingered on Ethan's words. She went about the rest of her day preparing dinner, tidying the living room, and attempting to focus on normal tasks, but she kept catching herself smiling at random moments, thinking about the quiet intensity of that conversation, the warmth of his gaze, and the sincerity in his voice. She felt emotions she hadn't expected: curiosity, longing, and a gentle stir of excitement that made her wonder about the hidden possibilities life might hold. By evening, when the house had quieted down and Liam had settled into his usual chair with a book, Amara found herself standing by the window, watching the sunlight fade into soft twilight. She reflected on the afternoon, on the unexpected intensity of a simple visit, and on the sudden realization that people could touch one's heart in ways that didn't fit into the neat boxes of friendship, love, or marriage. There was a complexity in human emotions, a delicate balance between admiration and longing, respect and curiosity, and she understood, perhaps for the first time, that a fleeting moment could carry the weight of unspoken truths. Amara didn't know what tomorrow would bring, nor did she fully understand the emotions Ethan's words had awakened. She only knew that life had shifted slightly, that the ordinary had been interrupted, and that a small, profound spark of something unnameable had been lit. The quiet house, the soft glow of evening, and the lingering memory of Ethan's gaze left her with a strange, thrilling sense of anticipation. She wondered if she would ever see him alone again. And if so, what words might follow and what moments might be revealed. And in that quiet, she realized that some encounters, brief and unexpected, could leave traces on the heart that were impossible. To ignore it wasn't about betrayal or temptation. It was about being seen, being understood, and feeling emotions that reminded her of her own depth. Amara allowed herself to breathe, to smile, to feel alive, knowing that this ordinary afternoon had become extraordinary in ways she could never have predicted. After that afternoon, Amara couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's words. They replayed in her mind like a soft echo, lingering longer than they should have. She tried to focus on her daily life, cooking, cleaning, preparing for Liam's weekend plans, but every time she closed her eyes, she could feel the warmth in Ethan's voice and the intensity of his gaze. It wasn't just admiration. It was as if he had recognized something in her that no one else had. A quiet strength, a small light inside her that had gone unnoticed. For years she had lived in the comfort of her predictable life with Liam, never doubting the depth of their love, yet never expecting to feel this strange, stirring pull toward someone else. Even if only in thought. Days passed before Ethan visited. Again, time Liam had been busy with work and meetings, and Amara found herself nervously preparing tea, wondering what he might say, what he might reveal. When he arrived, she noticed immediately how different he seemed, more open, yet cautious, as if he too had been thinking about that fleeting afternoon. "Hi, Amara," he said, smiling gently. His tone was warmer, softer, carrying the weight of their unspoken conversation. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you were." Amara's pulse quickened. "I'm well, thank you. Please, come in." She tried to keep her voice steady, but the small tremor she felt betrayed the swirl of emotions inside her. Ethan stepped into the living room, glancing around as though he were taking in the familiar space for the first time, and then seated himself carefully on the couch opposite her. The sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting his features, and for a moment she was struck by the calm presence he carried. The quiet assurance that seemed to balance her own racing thoughts. They spoke casually at first about the whether Liam's busy schedule, minor neighborhood news, but underneath it all, there was a charged tension, a quiet connection growing with every word. Amara found herself drawn into the conversation in a way that surprised her. She laughed more easily, shared small personal details, and felt a trust forming between them, one built on honesty rather than attraction. Yet, despite the absence of overt flirtation, there was an undercurrent of emotion, subtle but undeniable. Ethan leaned slightly forward, his hands clasped loosely, and spoke with a vulnerability that made Amara's heart flutter. "I couldn't stop thinking about our last conversation," he admitted, his voice calm but deliberate. "It's rare for someone to be seen the way you were that day. And I've been carrying that feeling with me ever since." Amara felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and something deeper and unexpected excitement at being acknowledged in such a genuine way. She found herself opening up more than she had intended. "I keep thinking about it too," she said quietly. "I didn't expect anyone to say something like that. It made me realize, I don't know. I don't think I've ever been noticed like that before." The words felt strange coming from her own lips, but they carried truth. There was something raw and human about the connection forming between them. A subtle intimacy that didn't require words about romance or desire. It was about understanding, about recognition, about the rare chance of being truly seen. The conversation shifted seamlessly from lighthearted topics to deeper matters. They spoke of dreams, of small regrets, of moments in life that had shaped them. Amara felt herself laughing and sighing in turns, responding to Ethan's stories with empathy, sharing her own experiences with a quiet honesty she had never shown. To anyone outside of Liam, Ethan listened with unwavering attention, nodding, asking questions, reflecting, making her feel as though her words mattered in a way that was profoundly rare. There was a pause in their conversation, a silence that wasn't awkward but charged with subtle emotion. Amara felt her breath catch as Ethan's gaze held hers. He wasn't looking at her with desire, nor was he demanding attention. He was looking at her with genuine respect, admiration, and a quiet intensity that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. She realized that there was a part of her that had longed for this, someone who could see her in the fullness of her being, who could notice the little details, the small gestures, the thoughts she often kept hidden. The afternoon slipped by unnoticed. Time seemed irrelevant as they shared stories, laughed at small jokes, and listened intently to each other. Amara's initial nervousness faded, replaced by a sense of comfort she hadn't anticipated. There was a rhythm to their conversation, a gentle back and forth that felt natural, as though they had always been able to communicate in this quiet, subtle way. Every glance, every pause, every thoughtful word carried weight. Though not of longing or temptation, but of emotional resonance at one point. Ethan spoke of a past disappointment, a failed relationship that had left him wary and introspective. Amara listened intently, offering a soft, empathetic response, and in that moment, she realized how rare it was to encounter someone willing to share their vulnerabilities without fear. It made her reflect on her own life with Liam, not that she doubted her love or commitment, but that sometimes, within the safety of routine, one could forget the depth of emotion that lived in the spaces between words. I never realized how much these conversations could matter, Amara said quietly, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. It's comforting, in a way I didn't expect. Ethan's lips curved into a small smile, and he nodded. I feel the same. Strange, isn't it? How a few hours of honesty can change everything in your head. Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, there was a wordless understanding between them. Amara felt a flutter, a quiet thrill that wasn't dangerous but exhilarating in its subtlety. It was the realization that human connection could be profound even without romance. That emotional intimacy could stir the heart as much as attraction. She had never imagined that being alone with Liam's friend could feel like this, like discovering a hidden corner of herself, part of her emotions that had been dormant. The conversation meandered into lighter subjects, again favorite books, music, childhood memories, but the undercurrent remained. The subtle awareness that they had shared something meaningful, something that lingered in the quiet spaces between words. Amara noticed how attentive Ethan was, the small ways he listened, the genuine interest in her thoughts, the respect that never wavered. It was intoxicating in a quiet, almost imperceptible way, stirring feelings she hadn't acknowledged before. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. The sunlight had softened to a gentle amber glow, and shadows stretched across the living room. Amara realized how long Ethan had stayed, and yet there was no awkwardness, no feeling of intrusion, like the sense that time had been suspended for this delicate, unexpected connection. She felt a quiet gratitude, a gentle awe for the rare chance to speak so openly, to feel understood in ways that transcended everyday conversation. Then, as if on cue, the sound of Liam's car pulling into the driveway broke the moment. The reality of her life returned with the suddenness of a snap, and Amara felt a pang of disappointment. The fragile intimacy, the emotional closeness, vanished with the familiar click of the front door. Ethan's presence shifted subtly, his posture straightening, his voice careful as he spoke again. More casual now, as though nothing had happened. I should probably go, he said, though his eyes held a flicker of unspoken emotion. A quiet acknowledgement that this was not an ordinary visit. Amara stood, smoothing her dress, forcing herself to regain composure. Yes, of course. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice steady, though her heart still fluttered from the intensity of their time together. She walked him to the door, feeling the strange tug of emotions she could neither fully understand nor ignore. Ethan gave her a gentle nod, a soft smile, and left, closing the door behind him. The house felt emptier than before, quieter, yet charged with the lingering resonance of their conversation. That evening, as Amara went about preparing dinner and settling Liam into his usual routine, she couldn't stop replaying the afternoon. In her mind, Ethan's words, his gaze, the vulnerability he had shared, it all felt surreal, yet profoundly real. She realized that she had been touched, not by attraction, not by temptation, but by the depth of emotional recognition. She had been seen, acknowledged, and understood in a way that reminded her of her own humanity, of the parts of herself that existed beyond the familiar patterns of daily life. As night fell, Amara found herself sitting by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The soft glow of the street lamps and the faint hum of distant cars made her feel oddly contemplative. She thought about Ethan, about the honesty he had shared, about the subtle emotional connection that had formed. It wasn't forbidden or reckless. It was simply real, a reminder that human emotions were layered, complex, and sometimes unpredictable. She allowed herself to smile softly, recognizing that her heart had been stirred in ways that were gentle yet unforgettable. The days after Ethan's second visit were a quiet storm in Amara's mind. She tried to focus on her life with Liam, who remained the same dependable, kind-hearted husband she had always known. Yet every ordinary moment seemed to carry the echo of Ethan's presence, the warmth in his voice, the way he had listened so intently, the subtle way his gaze had lingered without judgment. Amara found herself reflecting more often, questioning not Liam's love or commitment, but her own emotions, and the depth of connection she was capable of feeling. It was strange to realize that admiration and understanding could stir the heart just as profoundly as romance. When Ethan came again, it was under the pretext of planning a weekend outing with Liam, but this visit felt different. There was an unspoken acknowledgement between them, a quiet recognition that their last encounter had changed something in the air. Amara felt her pulse quicken as she opened the door, noticing immediately the calm but deliberate energy Ethan carried. "Hi, Amara," he said, his smile gentle, his voice soft yet steady. "I thought I'd drop by, see how things are going." His words were ordinary, but the undercurrent of meaning made her heart flutter. She invited him in, her hands brushing nervously against her dress as she led him to the living room. For a moment, she paused, taking in the quiet intimacy of their alone time. The house, filled with familiar furniture and warm sunlight, suddenly felt charged, almost alive. Ethan seated himself with ease, careful not to invade her personal space. Yet his presence was magnetic, subtle yet undeniable. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotion, a quiet tension that neither needed to define but both were aware of. They began casually, speaking of weekend plans, of Liam's work, of trivial matters, but it didn't take long for the conversation to deepen. Amara found herself laughing at small jokes, revealing personal stories, and sharing thoughts she rarely voiced. Ethan listened with careful attention, not just hearing her words but understanding the emotions behind them. It was a rare and beautiful thing to feel truly seen and acknowledged without the pressures of expectation or desire. Each glance he gave, each small nod, carried an intensity that made her heart beat faster, yet it was never threatening. It was admiration, respect, and subtle affection all at once. At one point, Ethan leaned back slightly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Amara," he began softly, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Not in a way that crosses any line, but in a way that reminds me how rare it is to meet someone who feels so genuine, so kind, so alive." Amara's breath caught, her chest warming with the sincerity of his words. She realized that what she felt for Ethan was not about temptation, not about desire, but about the quiet, stirring recognition of her own worth. Reflected back at her by someone else, she shifted slightly, unsure of how to respond. I feel the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's strange. I didn't expect anyone to see me this way. Not like this." She felt a vulnerability she had never allowed herself to express, and yet it felt natural. as if all the walls she had built around her emotions were gently dissolving in his presence. Ethan nodded, his gaze softening, acknowledging without judgment. It was a moment of quiet intimacy, a connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries of friendship and marriage, existing instead in the fragile space of shared understanding. Hours passed unnoticed as they spoke of dreams, regrets, and quiet hopes. Amara discovered that Ethan had ambitions and fears he had never shared with anyone, and in turn, she revealed small, tender parts of herself, memories of childhood, fleeting, regrets, moments of doubt that she rarely admitted aloud. Each revelation was met with empathy, with gentle encouragement, with a feeling of validation that made her heart swell. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt a profound sense of emotional freedom. A sense that she could be herself without fear, without pretense. Without the need to hide behind roles or expectations, the afternoon sunlight softened, casting long shadows across the room, but neither Amara nor Ethan noticed. Their conversation meandered, flowing naturally between lighthearted jokes and deeper reflections. There was no rush, no pressure, only a quiet, shared presence that seemed to stretch time itself. Amara realized that these moments, the stolen hours of honesty and emotional connection, were shaping her in ways she had never anticipated. She felt alive, aware, and profoundly grateful for the sincerity Ethan offered at one point. Ethan spoke of a past heartbreak, a failed friendship that had left him wary and introspective. Amara listened carefully, offering empathy, and in doing so, she realized the depth of her own emotional capacity. The conversation was not about romantic love, yet it carried a weight that rivaled it. She understood that connection was not always about desire. It could exist in honesty, in understanding, in the recognition of one another's vulnerabilities. Each word he spoke, each story he shared, left an imprint on her heart. Gentle but undeniable. As the day waned, Ethan's presence remained calming yet electrifying. He wasn't there to seduce or manipulate. He was there to witness, to listen, to share a part of himself and see her reflected in turn. Amara felt a strange clarity, a sense that she had discovered a hidden dimension of her own emotions, a capacity for feeling and understanding that she had never acknowledged. She realized that life was not only about routines and responsibilities, was also about these subtle, fleeting moments that stirred the heart, challenged the mind, and reminded one of their own humanity. When Liam called to say he would be home later, Amara felt a pang of disappointment. The delicate rhythm of their conversation, the fragile intimacy, was about to be interrupted again. Ethan noticed the shift, the slight tension in her posture, and he leaned back, his voice careful but soft. "I should probably go soon," he said, though his eyes betrayed a reluctant hesitation. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that what they shared, however fleeting, mattered deeply and would linger long after the visit ended. Amara walked him to the door, feeling a mixture of gratitude, longing, and quiet melancholy. "Thank you," she said softly, her words carrying the weight of her emotions. "For everything. For listening. For seeing me." Ethan smiled, a gentle, sincere curve of his lips, and nodded. "Always, Amara. Always." And with that, he left, closing the door with a soft click that made the house feel simultaneously empty and profoundly alive. Alone once more, Amara sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street bathed in the golden hues of late afternoon. Her mind replayed every word, every glance, every subtle expression from their time together. She realized that what she felt was not betrayal or temptation, but a profound appreciation for connection and understanding. It was a reminder that even in the comfort of marriage, one could feel stirred, awakened, reminded of their own depth. And that this was not wrong, it was human. The next few days were spent in reflection. Amara moved through her routine with a heightened awareness, noticing small things in her home, in her life, in Liam, that she had taken for granted. Yet her thoughts frequently returned to Ethan, to the honesty of their conversations, to the rare emotional resonance she had felt. It wasn't about him taking anything from her life. It was about realizing that emotional fulfillment could come in many forms. Hey. And that recognition, admiration, and understanding were powerful gifts in themselves. When Ethan visited again, under the guise of discussing Liam's weekend plans, Amara felt a familiar flutter in her chest. She greeted him with a warm smile, though her heart still carried the subtle tension of what they had shared before. This time their conversation was even more open, flowing effortlessly between everyday matters and deeper reflections. They laughed, they shared stories, they explored small truths about themselves without fear. Amara realized that this connection, gentle and respectful as it was, had awakened something in her, a capacity for emotional intimacy she had not fully known existed. By the time the afternoon faded into evening, Amara felt a quiet peace, a deep appreciation for the subtle beauty of what they shared. Ethan's presence had not disrupted her life. It had enriched it, reminding her of the delicate power of human connection. She understood that love was not only about possession or romantic longing, it was about being seen, being heard, being understood, and being valued for one's true self. In Ethan's company, she had felt all of that. And it had left a lasting mark on her heart as the final moments of daylight slipped away. Amara reflected on the entire experience. She realized that life was full of unexpected encounters, moments that stirred the soul and awakened dormant emotions. Ethan's words, his attention, his understanding, they were not threats or temptations, but gifts, reminders of the richness of human emotion. She smiled softly, acknowledging the subtle ache of longing that accompanied such awareness. And yet she felt gratitude above all else.